Welcome to the OIC, otherwise known as the Omnipresent Information Connection podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Peterson.
And I'm the co-host, Noah Hansen. The Omnipresent Information Connection podcast is all about your world and your unique walk on this path called life. We present fascinating, life-changing information from around the world that has been validated. We also authenticate the information by providing you with links to where you can find out more about what we are talking about on our show. This podcast includes historically accurate, genuine facts that have helped shape our daily lives into what they are today. Today we have another very special episode planned for you, and today, if you read the title, it is going to be on what, Kevin?
The incredible power of belief.
That's right, the power of belief. And belief is a very powerful force in this world. In fact, it may even be the number one force in this world in our own individual personal lives. And we say that for good reason. Why is belief such a powerful force in our lives? And that's the question we're going to be answering for you on this podcast today. Not only with the quantum physics and the neuron-changing strategies that we're going to give you, but also with a little more that we give you at the end of this podcast, so we're going to save for then. So the power of belief has been something that's very prevalent in my life just because I've had so many beliefs in my life. I ended up finding God 3 years ago, and my beliefs have not faltered since then or changed along the lines of who I believe in since then. But before then, my beliefs were kind of all over the place. I believed in this, a little bit of that, and I was pulling from all sorts of spiritual traditions, trying to make my own up as I went along. And what I primarily am talking about here is beliefs in the afterlife, beliefs in spirituality, beliefs in things that really mean the most to me, and what's important. And those beliefs were just all over the place up until about 2-3 years ago.
Absolutely.
What's your experience with belief?
Belief is being able to actually see with the eye with the nose and mouth and ears cannot.
So it's the unseen, the unsensed.
The unsensed. Because though true belief is not, and everyone thinks that it's a feeling. It's actually a reciprocating or reciprocal acknowledgement of a worthwhile truth.
Okay. It's an acknowledgement. It's something that you hold close to you, that you consider dear to you, but that you can't really go off anything but faith for.
Well, I mean, you've got the faith, you got the trust, you got the belief, right? Mm-hmm. But belief is being able to not need to put any other element to it. It is so raw, it's so real, it's so... for any better or less action word, it is the driving force of your essence.
Right. And that makes sense to me, especially considering the fact that what I was getting at there is that my beliefs did leave me somewhat astray. And beliefs that lead you astray, for example, I can give you is that if I see a butterfly and I say it's a monster because I've never seen a butterfly before, and this suddenly scares me, that butterfly is not a monster, but I believe it's a monster just because of that is what I'm projecting onto that creature.
Correct. It's a labeling. It's a naming, yep.
Right, and just in the same way, your beliefs, if they aren't ordered, if they aren't in a really real area, if you don't believe in something that's truly real and truly going to lead you on the right path, then your beliefs could possibly lead you astray.
Correct. Now, let's take a gentle walk into the past, shall we?
Sure thing.
Now, why do you think that so many people around the world, different cultures, carved things into rock?
Because they believed that they needed to record this information for their ancestors, for their future ancestors.
More importantly, they believed that making an imprint upon the earth would leave a lasting imprint upon one's soul.
That makes sense. And in a way, it kind of does. Everything that we write down has been even scientifically proven to be able to be retained better.
Absolutely, but you have to understand is that belief is putting things together in a way to where it becomes unquestionable. And so when you're looking at totem poles, when you're looking at all these ancient sand scripts, when you're looking at all these different cave drawings, when you're looking at all these different things, there had to be something of significant substance in order to be believed in such a way that it then became carved or written in to become a permanent structure in that time frame of history.
Right, but can beliefs not also be something that can be proven wrong with the presentation of a more powerful or a more true truth?
Only through purified education comes that explanation.
Right, that makes sense.
Right? And so until you get to that pinnacle point, your belief, the thing that you have etched into history is the greatest belief that you have at that time.
Right.
And so it is the moving force. It is that quiet, unspoken force that awakens you daily to be able to want to continue to be able to see it in physical reality.
Another very powerful aspect of belief is the fact that when large groups of people believe in the same thing, that can really affect a very large amount of people. I mean, look at all the world's religions.
Mm-hmm. And in that, you've got a lot of skewed beliefs because of man, right?
Right, and that's just a man's writing or a man's word being taken in a way that's higher than, or put on a pedestal, you could say, up above God's word.
Correct.
Or the true word is what I'm trying to get at here. The very raw truth, the truth that cannot change.
Correct.
Because it's true for all of us, whether we want to believe in it or not.
Absolutely. And understand this. One person with a belief is equal to a force of 99 who have only had interest in it once.
Now, where do you pull that number from, 99?
Because it only takes 1% of any population, any nation, any amount of people gathered together, 1%, to be able to make that belief a reality, right?
That makes sense, yeah. And as it did with people like Jesus.
Mm-hmm. What one leader, 99 followers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So understand that your beliefs have power.
It could move an entire nation, move the entire world.
Not only that, but to be able to bring down the walls of Jericho, to be able to literally part the waters, literally to be able to do all these things because of an unquestionable belief, right?
Yeah, and on top of that, a lack of a belief or a not being presented with the truth that you need to believe in something that is going to benefit your life, you could say is a suppression of humanity, is a suppression of our souls. If we don't have access to the real truth that we should have access to, like I believe in these days we are presented with, then a lot of times people can just take for granted the belief that's in place, even though that belief may be just man's belief.
Right. Now, what is the real power of belief in manifestation?
Belief that you act upon, belief that you really live out each day, that you walk in it.
And you're absolutely right. It's a daily habit, a daily choice, right?
I would say, yeah.
But back in 1937, when Napoleon Hill originally published his book, Think and Grow Rich, everybody wanted an explanation of how manifestation changes thought to reality. In other words, everyone wanted to know how the formula for law of attraction, which is set out below, actually works. Now, desire plus belief plus expectancy plus action equals manifestation.
Desire plus belief plus expectancy plus action.
Yep.
So that's the expectancy is where you have to believe in what you believe in. You have to really believe in what you ask for, or what you're trying to manifest. Believe that it's going to manifest, and we've talked about this before. And then that belief factor is large in part in manifesting what you want in this world, in the outcome.
Right. So we'll leave the link in the description below about Think and Grow Rich book. But so Napoleon Hill offered an explanation. He said, when faith, by which he meant belief, is blended with the vibration of thought, the subconscious mind instantly picks up the vibration, translates it into the spiritual equivalent, and transmits it to the infinite intelligence, as in the case of prayer.
Let's talk a little more about vibration. I like that you brought that up because, it's not just our words that vibrate the air in front of us and have a vibrational impact on the world around us. It's actually our thoughts will have a vibrational impact around us for several reasons. We know this.
Absolutely. And when doctors have put all this fancy electronic equipment on us to be able to examine our physical states, to be able to see what ends up happening is, when you see something that you truly believe in, what happens to your entity? What happens to your shell, your skin, your body? What ends up happening when you see something and you truly believe it 100%?
Well, it depends on what you're believing in. Depends on what you're seeing. Obviously, you're going to have a reaction that's both physical, mental, and emotional.
Right, but we don't talk about what is not seen by the eye, right?
Sure.
So,
sure.
Does your body warm up? Does it cool down?
Oh, yeah, I would say it cools down, for sure.
Right? It all varies on what the topic is, what it is, right?
Right. I'm thinking of a scare situation.
Mm-hmm. In a scare situation, it'd be cold, and a loving situation becomes warm, right?
That's right.
But is it just one part of the body, or is it the entire body?
When you're fearful, I would say it's the entire body. I mean, you can get clammy hands, you can get, cold feet.
When you're in love, you can have that same experience,
yeah,
right?
Throughout the whole body tingles,
Right. So the bottom line is that the physical belief, seeing in the flesh, is being able to look through a camera lens at the thermal dynamics of the belief.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And through seeing through thermal dynamics, are you able to see the true rest of the story, right? On how that belief affected you, right?
Yeah, you're getting a little more into intuition, too.
Correct. Now, let's get into intuition,
Sure
right?
thing, let's go.
All right. So now we're into intuition, a sixth sense. Women have it all the time. Mothers have it extremely a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
Now, why is that?
Well, there's many reasons, and one reason I can bring up is quantum physics. We've proven that there is entanglement between two particles that were once connected in an atom's structure, and when you separate these two electrons to even 14 miles apart, when this experiment was done, I've mentioned that experiment in a past podcast. We'll put the link below for you to learn more about that. When they separated these particles for 14 miles apart, they needed no time or space in order to show their connection. They were instantly communicating, and or another theory is they were instantly set. Once they were entangled, once they were connected, they were instantly set and now forever entangled, no matter how much distance separates them. We've proven that this communication is faster than the speed of light, and it could prove a mother's feeling that she gets when her son or daughter is in danger. They get oftentimes, and this does happen, it's documented, they get a feeling wash over them of dread if their son or daughter is in danger.
Now, let's go back to anywhere from the 50s through the 80s, 90s, possibly, for some listeners, right?
Sure, let's go.
Have you ever played the game of communication to where you have two cans in one string connected, and you are talking to each other through a can and being able to clearly hear through what, and it didn't matter, and this is what was the craziest thing. It didn't matter if it was rope, shoestring, or fishing line.
Right.
The communication traveled without you seeing it from one can to the other clearly enough to understand what was being said and then be able to communicate back.
Right.
Did you have to believe that there was a string there? Is that what made that so effective, was the string?
That's an interesting question. I would say so, because that's what transmits the vibrations.
Or was it the belief that you could hear the all-encompassing power?
Well, that's that's up for interpretation.
It is, but the bottom line is that no one does anything without expecting a result. So when I was a little kid, and I had this really cute little neighbor, we used to be able to have a really long string. And I'm talking, I had to work a couple of weeks to be able to buy enough shoestrings to be able to tie together to be able to finally get to her window, right?
Sure.
But one day I had succeeded. I had been able to borrow 2 Campbell soup cans from my mom, cleaned them up really well, and took the labels off. I just, went over the top with it. But I had cleaned up the cans, put the holes in the can, put the string on the can, and then I had called her to be able to tell her that I was going to literally bring communication to her.
You
right?
called her on the cell phone?
No, we didn't have cell phones back then. It was the landline.
Oh, yeah.
That's how old I am.
The sure thing.
So, but Ma Bell, right? But the bottom line is that I called her on the landline and told her what I was doing so that I didn't shock her. But once we had set up this landline and it was taught this Campbell Soup line of communication, it was crazy on how well we could be able to then communicate, because we were too poor. We couldn't afford walkie-talkies that were just coming out onto the market, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, calculators back in my day were a couple $100 for a standardized calculator.
Oh, my.
Just to kind of date me for a little.
That in perspective.
Right? So, when we would communicate, we would make sure that what we communicated about was what we really, truly wanted to communicate to each other about, right? And so we did this experiment of literally being able to speak for an hour to be able to see how long this transmission would continue, right?
Sure.
I remember many of nights falling asleep trying to be able to see how long we could be able to talk through this line of communication. But it was my belief that it could never end, that it allowed that to never end, right? I literally just fell asleep, and that was one of my funny stories in my lifetime. But the funniest part was being able to wake up in the morning to car honks, and I had forgotten that to be able to take the string off the can, right?
Oh,
and I literally almost had the motorcyclist come off his motorcycle because he hit that string, and it hit my window, and it was kind of a funny moment. But that was our connecting moment to one another. So now,
Man, that motorcyclist must have been mad.
Yeah, it wasn't the most happy. So you can see immediately that this doesn't really explain the phenomenon of manifestation. Is there some way of explaining the process which makes more sense to us nowadays? The fact that matter and energy are the same thing is probably the closest we can come to the explanation of how the law of attraction actually works and belief, right?
Yeah, and what I was talking about when I was telling you that not only our words vibrating through the air cause a vibrational imprint on the world around us, but our thoughts do too. The reason I brought that up is because we now know that you can place sensors that are not connected to a person's head in any way that will pick up different movements in the brain of electricity based on what a person is thinking. Your thoughts will literally be able to be read outside of the capsule of the skull, the capsule of what's holding the brain,
Mm-hmm.
They reverberate through the brain based on the firings off that are going on.
Absolutely.
And that causes an imprint on the vibrations around you. Now, all energy is essentially at its core is vibration, and that's why this is so powerful, because quantum physics is now proving that these vibrations can be influenced from your thoughts, from your words, and Dr. Emoto's wonderful experiments on water will prove that not only do they make an imprint, but they can make a more positive or a more negative imprint depending on how loving or hateful the thought or the word is.
So, to be able to sum it up, is that any thought which passes through the brain is simply an energetic process. That energy can be converted into a material form in the real world.
So how do you change your beliefs? I've got something we can talk about, but what do you got for us?
Beliefs are changed when the change becomes change within you.
It needs to be an inner change, not an outer circumstances change. And I think we see that quite often, actually. I mean, that's almost like a psych ward's main job, is to change the patient's beliefs about the world around them and the world is inside of them.
Right.
But they push that away, and they don't want to have that happen oftentimes.
And the reason for that being is because of the disconnection.
Yeah, and they don't have that interchange going on that you're saying.
Mm-hmm. And you have to understand it is that when you cannot connect with another human being, that gets scary. That gets really frightening fast.
Oh yeah, for some people more than others.
Right. And so when in the psych ward, when you're dealing with people that have got mental traumas that happen in their life,
Yep.
just because you can't see it doesn't mean that to them, it is their reality, right?
Yeah. And I know what you're talking about exactly, for sure.
So to be able to sum it all up is that what you envisions you.
Mm-hmm.
What you believes in you.
Uh-huh. And here you go. Here's another big one, is that your beliefs will manifest in your dreams, where literally anything could be real for that dream.
And you have to understand is that the reason why dreams can be so powerful, both positive and negative,
Mm-hmm.
is that you get yourself out of the way and let the manifestation take over where you cannot.
Yeah, your subconscious takes over.
Well, not only your subconscious, but the real you takes over for you in your defense. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, because unless it's a lucid dream, you can't really control your reactions to the
Correct.
circumstances in these dreams.
Absolutely.
That's why dream work is so powerful for some people, but also very confusing, because that's a lot of information. That's a lot of false belief if you have it stuck up in there,
Right. But as we have learned is that the brain can be able to store information infinitely. And just because they may not think that they have experienced it in their lifetime doesn't mean that they haven't actually thought about it or experienced it at that time. To clarify, what I'm trying to say is that when you're driving down the road and you're seeing nothing but either nature or houses flash on by, right? You don't have the time to be able to look at the windows, look at the scenery, and that sort of thing, right?
Right. But your subconscious picks up 100% of all the information that you take in.
Correct.
Through your senses.
And so, therefore, it keeps storing that information. And so you get these feelings of deja vu. You get these feelings of, man, I feel like I've been here before. You get these beliefs as if though you had stood there once before.
Right.
And in reality, a great chance of probability is you probably drove past it or something similar to it, and now you're just connecting to what your memory had stored.
Mm-hmm. It feels like you're time traveling.
Absolutely.
That's deja vu for you, though. We can do a whole podcast on deja vu someday. Look forward to that, listeners. But I'm glad you brought up the subconscious and how the brain works in all of this, in our beliefs, because that's exactly the strategy I want to give the listeners in this podcast, is the strategy for reprogramming your subconscious mind with your conscious mind. So, as I said, your subconscious is taking in 100% of the information that's going on around you at all times. Mm-hmm. Now, your conscious mind is the area that we're operating in less than half the time per usual. Half the time that we spend awake is spent still subconsciously either daydreaming or our minds trailing off somewhere or something along those lines. And that's going into an alpha brainwave state, sort of going inside of ourselves, but still being awake. Mm-hmm. And the conscious mind that resides in the beta, gamma, and higher brainwave states. And through these brainwave states, this is when we're actively manifesting, making choices in our lives from a conscious place. We're really choosing this. This conscious state is super important, and the strategy I'm going to give you is called neuroplasticity. What science now tells us is that the neurons in our brain make connections, and they branch out and they reach other neurons, and this is what causes our memories to be held in our brain. There'll be links in the description for all of this. And when these neurons make these certain pathways and these certain memories, it's easier for them to remember those and make those pathways happen again. That's why when you have a traumatic memory, your neurons are connecting with each other in certain places that are traumatic to you to remember. And then later on in the future, your neurons will be so adapted to feeling that fear in that moment that they'll want to feel that again. They'll want to make those connections again. What neuroplasticity basically tells us is that we consciously can reject those pathways and cause our neurons to make different pathways. And it's as simple as setting your intention and performing an action that is different from the reaction that you would normally have for these pathways that are already created in your brain that you want to change. So if you want to change these pathways, you have to consciously choose something different, choose a different reaction, choose a different emotion, or do the work that allows you to feel such emotions until your neurons are finally out of having that one set pathway that it's used to feeling, that fear, the traumatic memory that it's made, and cause yourself not just to like blank that memory out like we're told so much is something that happens, and people do blank their memories out. What we're talking about here is when you feel that, when those pathways are being made, you take your own brain cells a different direction.
Right.
And that's to sum it up, that's neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Powerful information. It's really making some headways in psychology and all kinds of sciences today.
Well, right. And that's what Pathways Prosperity Group does.
That's right.
Is that we help you to be able to neuronically to be able to change or alter your way of thinking to be able to have it maximized for your everyday living.
Yep, that's a reflection in the cellular universe for what you do for people on a daily basis at Pathways.
So, simply put, is that we can re-trigger what has triggered us in the first place and put in a new trigger to be able to allow us to be able to manifest the righteous thoughts for the righteous actions for the righteous result.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just that simple. You hear that, things are simple, but in reality, when you keep it to a 3-step process, the process will work for you every time.
That's right, yeah, 3-step process, and honestly, if you can keep something up for 30 days, you've already got it. That's already a new neuron pathway. A neuron has chosen new pathways by that time, doing something every day. That's why you can pretty much pick up any skill you want to after a certain amount of time of just repetitive practice.
Yep. May your thoughts be like fireworks, beautiful and upward spreading, right?
That's right. Branching out on the upwards track.
Yeah, bringing new thoughts to life, right?
I hear that. Wonderful. Thanks for leaving us with that, Kevin. Remember, listeners, we do have a Patreon where you can contribute to our cause and contribute to our mission and become a part of the OIC family at that Patreon, the link below. We look forward to seeing you on our next video or podcast, whatever it is we'll be doing. And we've got lots and lots planned for you for the future, not only on this podcast, but on our main website, inanewway.com.
Oh, I see.
Thank you, Kevin.
This has been another life-enhancing, authenticated podcast aired by the OIC and brought to you by the faithful OIC sponsors and contributors. Please tune in every week and subscribe to our podcast. And while you're there, explore our website with all the posts, videos, and podcasts that we have created with you in mind. While you're on the journey through our website, you will see our Patreon page where you can become a faithful contributor yourself with the freedom to be a part of our team today. Thank you.